Hello everybody, you have tuned in to Eric Jose on Making a Murderer on YouTube. I cover virtually any aspect of making a murderer. I go over the evidence, the documents, the photos. So if you like, stay tuned, and in the future I'll have many more videos besides the one you're about to see. Hello folks, how you doing? We're here today doing a little chat with Mr. Mark Hoddinott again about his third survey and some of the results of that. And we're also talking a little bit about the control question t-shirts here that you can see I'm wearing here, just so you can see there. This is the t-shirts that were made for me by Mark Hoddinott and Paul Capaldi. Mr. Capaldi had them made up. He had 6 made. One is for me, one is for Mark, one is for Paul. The other 3 are going to be raffled off. Well, they're going to be, there's a raffle currently where you can buy a raffle ticket, and the 3 shirts are going to be raffled off at the rally in Manitowoc in a couple of weeks. So, if you're interested, I will leave the information below. Just go to PayPal, go to Send Money, and enter the link I'm going to leave below for you, and that will allow you to make the donation to get your ticket. If you're in the US, it's $1.30. If you're in the UK, it's £1, and if you're in Australia, it's £1.50, I believe is what Mark said. So anyways, that's how that works. So please enter into the raffle and to get your control question t-shirt. And here we go. My control question t-shirt.
Yeah. I do have tell me about the control question.
I think a lot of people here on this channel have heard a lot about the control question. But this is, I love that you guys came up with this, because you and Paul, because if people go out, if people buy this shirt, and especially the ones that are going to get made very soon, and they're wearing it out in public, people might actually walk up to them and ask them about it. And then the person can say, well, the state has been saying, and also the on-bank majority have been saying that this proves this. But, in fact, it proves the exact opposite of that. So it
exactly.
It's just a way to get people to ask about it, so that people can know that the state has been lying about this for a, considerable amount of time. And I think that's something that's important. So
yeah, I agree. I just like the idea that it's evocative and makes people ask, well, what's that about?
Right.
It gives you an opening for a discussion.
Exactly.
Irrespective of whether it's about the control question or any other matter of the case. So
yeah, and I mean, a lot of people can easily get behind the fact that they don't. Well, put it another way, a lot of people out there don't like to think that kids in the juvenile justice system, or in the justice system, or criminal justice system in general, are going to be preyed upon. And when you see what you see with Brendan, you're left with the feeling of a juvenile who the system preyed upon, and that's something that's not hard for people to get behind and support. Whereas with adult criminals, of course, it gets a lot shakier. People are a lot, the innocence of youth, takes out certain aspects or certain factors that when you're dealing with adult criminals, you can't quite be as sure about, because they've lived a little bit, they've developed bad habits, they've done some things, whatever it is. Once you've lived a little, you're not as innocent as you are when you're 16 years old. So it makes things a little different.
And it's interesting you make those observations about youth being preyed upon, and if we apply that to Brendan's circumstances and just recall some of the conversations that Tom Fassbender had with Brendan, and said things like in the early days of February, I think it was February,
right,
2006, he says to him, look, I'm a policeman, but I'm not right now, I'm a father. Right. And I want to come over there and give you a hug. Right. Blah, blah, blah. So this is predatory in the extreme. Not only are they subverting his will, but they're actually, I call it abuse. They're abusing him. And I'd
say mentally conditioning him. That
Yeah.
whole entire weekend was all mental conditioning of Brendan, because they knew they could condition him, and they thought they could make it look a little more slick, but Brendan just didn't know. And Brendan was
Yes.
so lost that even on March 1st showtime, Brendan
Yes.
just, he was still guessing at it and couldn't remember the past things that they'd worked out with him, and and it was all just still a big old train wreck, but they thought,
Yes.
they thought it would go differently, but I'm sure they're realizing now that it didn't go as well as they'd hoped, and now everybody's telling them so.
And I know it's repetitive, but seriously, as professionals, very early on, they would have realized, hey, there's something wrong here. This is not something we should be relying upon. Our professional training tells us we shouldn't be relying on this, but you know what? They went ahead anyway.
Yeah.
That's the thing that disgusts me, because they went ahead knowing what they were doing was wrong and was likely to be extremely unreliable.
Yeah.
But Brendan was expendable in their minds because they were after Stephen. That's basically what their motive was.
Yeah. I recently said to Drizzen in a tweet that I can't remember what his tweet was about exactly, but I basically said it was about Brendan's interrogation, I think. And I said, and if you expect anybody to believe that these guys spent an entire weekend with Brendan and had absolutely zero, awareness of his limitations, that's laughable. That's ridiculous. They're either corrupt or the worst investigators ever.
Yes.
To have not picked up on that over an entire weekend. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So.
Anyway,
so
it's all coming to a head. Yes, shall we go to the survey? So,
just remember, everybody, sorry, one more time. I'm going to say this at the intro of the video, but the link will be below for you to go ahead and make a $1.30 donation if you're in the U.S. or £1 if you're in the UK. And what is it for the Aussies?
Well, I'd say it would be about $1.50 actually.
Okay, so if you're an Aussie, it's $1.50. Send it to, you go through PayPal, and I'll leave you the link of where you go. You just go to your PayPal account, you say send money, and you put in the link I'm going to leave in the info below this video, and you can donate if it's you guys, £1.50. If you're in the UK, it's £1.30, or it's £1, and if you're in the United States, it's $1.30. Okay.
I'll tell you what, because we're a generous lot down under, we'll make our contribution $2 Australian, right? Right?
Hey, you're
$2 Australian.
There.
Oh, it's easy. I'm a financial advisor. My certificates are on the wall up there. So, and I just should hasten to add that I've just within the last 24 hours, I've just arrived back in Australia from Europe. Both my eyes look a bit ordinary.
Right.
And in 2 days' time, I'm jumping on a plane heading the other direction to places in the wild, wild west. Okay, so
is that actually West Coast or just in the United States?
Yes. Well, no, I'm firstly I'm going across to the East Coast, and then I'm coming back to Wisconsin next week. So.
Yep, I just finalized my rental car and today and got that lined up. And
I tried to book a
reservation at the hotel though. I'm gonna have to get the name of that from you again.
Yep.
Don't say it here.
I was going to try. I was going to try to book a RAV4 just for the experience from the rental car company.
Oh, that'd be funny. Yeah. The new ones don't look anything like the old ones, though.
Yeah, I know. So, okay, so I will go to the survey. Yes, so this, as you all know, is the third in a series of 3 surveys.
Yep.
And this survey was almost a capstone survey to look at the law reform issues that are relevant, or perhaps people see as relevant, in order to hopefully, in time, prevent situations with Stephen and Brendan not happening again. I won't bore you too much with the preamble that I have in the past. I think most people know how the survey was structured and what the intent was.
Right.
So I'll just go to each question in turn and we'll have a chat about them. So question 1 was, when it comes to confessions, what importance should they have in evidence? There were two choices here. I think confession should be taken on face value without the need for any corroborating evidence. Approximately 4% of the people thought that. And the second was, I think confession should not be permitted as evidence unless there is reasonably reliable corroborating evidence.
Correct.
96%.
I think that's a good move. I think that's true. And I would say that echoes the words of, a prosecutor by the name of Robert Milan, who,
yes,
if any of you don't know, he's in the YouTube video called Brendan Dassey, A True Story of a False Confession. He is one of the guys up on the panel. He's a former prosecutor, federal prosecutor, huge qualifications as a prosecutor, and he is absolutely pounds that to the death, saying that he actually repeats himself twice when he says it, but he says a confession without corroboration is absolutely worthless. And then when he says it, he goes, "I'll say it again," and he repeats it again. Because he's just like, that's absolutely the way he feels about it. So,
and as we've said before, by the way, on my journey back from Europe, which is about 24 hours on the plane, I downloaded Making a Murder Again to my phone and watched it yet again. I think that's number 12 now. And this whole issue about confessions and the reliability of confessions is so important that, in the absence of any corroborating evidence, and even confessions seem to have greater weighting even than in-court evidence. As we know in Brendan's trial, he got up and recanted his confessions.
Yeah, he
recanted the evidence, but seemingly under the pressure and environment of courts and the prosecution and the jury he recanted, but seemingly has less importance than this unsubstantiated, unsupported confession.
Yeah,
and none of
the importance of that call that they played, that prison call. They played it 3 times. And the effect that had on the jury can't be underestimated. Should have never been there. Should have been Fruit of the Poisonous Tree of Len Kaczynski, and should have never ever been played for the jury, ever.
Yes. And yes, so there are a few culprits in that. One of Kaczynski, of course, Kelly another, Judge Fox even allowing it to be brought into evidence. So.
Right.
Okay, so question 2. This was an interesting question. Do you subscribe to the view that it is better that 10 guilty people go free rather than one innocent person be found guilty? Now, the results, there are yes or no. So yes, that is, that it's better that 10 guilty people go free rather than one innocent person be found guilty. Approximately 60% or 59% supported that principle. However, approximately 40% said no. I found that a little surprising, to be honest.
Did you? I would actually probably put myself in the 40. I would probably put myself into the 40%. I believe that the how do I want to explain this here? I believe that the rules are a good thing and they should be followed. I believe that the system has rules for a reason, and I think the rules are being somewhat ignored in certain places, particularly by prosecutors. I think the rules are being obscured in certain other places, and I think these are the problems that are creating these windows for these wrongful convictions to happen. And the other thing is that we now have actual evidence and real studies done now that can tell us, look, this is where we go wrong. We have actual empirical data out there that we can look at with our justice system and go, yeah, look, but this is where we go wrong. Almost 90% of the time when we do this, we're wrong. Almost 80% of the time when we do this, we're wrong. Almost, and it's becoming a science like that where we should be able to look and go, we could improve this, but we're not.
Yes.
And that is really the problem. The problem is the answers are there. It's just hard to get anybody to care, or it's slow to get anybody to care.
And wouldn't that make it even more important, this principle?
I'm just more of a law and order kind of guy, so I don't like the thought of 10 guilty people going free, you know. But I also don't like. I can't. I also equally loathe the thought of one innocent person going to jail or prison who isn't, you know, who isn't guilty. But the thing is that the impact that 10 guilty people have on the street is it's considerable, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, I think we all would hold true that we would like all guilty people to be found guilty, if that were possible. It's I suppose the question, not so much for our personal views, but for general view, is how much value do we place on innocence, right?
Right.
Now,
because the guilty
person can always
is important, and I think it was eroded with Stephen. But
yes.
Go ahead.
And you know, in a sense, you know, there's always another chance to get the guilty person, but is there another chance to take back someone's innocence, short of the sorts of things we're going through, with Stephen?
See, where I try to, you know, where I more have my bones to pick is like with, you may remember the video I did about the innocence deniers. I'm going to try to do this quickly so we can get back to your survey. But the innocence deniers, these are people like, for instance, this woman in Illinois, her last name is escaping me, but she was the DA. She had this kid, Devontae Sanford.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I remember
that. 8 days after the conviction, the guy who did it came in, providing all the proof and corroboration that he did it. He gave a sworn affidavit that Devontae Sanford wasn't involved with it. Blah, 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 all this stuff. That lady, Kimworth, that's her name, Kimworth, she didn't do a thing about it. Eventually, the state's DOJ had to step in and let that kid out. And that kid ended up getting almost $500,000. $500,000, dude. Trust me, it would have been a lot less 8 days after his conviction. Wouldn't have gotten anywhere near $500,000.
Yes, I remember having this discussion with you, and I think I made the point that, you know, we would have had a lot more respect for the prosecutor had she admitted her mistake, said, look, I made an error. Yeah. And we'd have much more respect for the system that people admit their mistakes, let alone mitigate the financial consequences of that mistake.
Like I did with the prosecutor in the Pink Gun Mystery, when I did that video about the Pink Gun Mystery. You know, that guy had it wrong. But then he saw the evidence that, okay, no, I have it wrong. And instead of burying it or sitting on it or something else, he said, nope, let her go. Let her go, and started building his case against the one that he now knew did it.
Yes.
And that is commendable. Yeah, he made a mistake. He went after the wrong person at first. He caused that person a lot of grief. Even still to this day, that person is catching a lot of grief because a lot of people still believe she was involved with that. And but it's getting better and better, you know, for her. Yes. But I mean, it affected her life. But you know what? At least she's not sitting behind bars, and she's able to live her life. And that's important. It minimizes the amount of recompense or, you know, compensation that people are going to want, you know, if you catch them quick enough. That's why conviction CIUs are so important. Another thing Robert Milan talks about, conviction integrity units. That's where a prosecutor's office checks on their own convictions and stuff over, you know, after periods of time to check on their cases and look and see if they did maybe get something wrong, or if the evidence is pointing in another direction, or or if new developments have come up in those cases or whatever. That way it's happening from within, because when it's happening with a defense lawyer and a prosecutor, the adversarial process, all that stuff, it makes things, that's why it takes so long to get wrongful convictions corrected, because the natural, you know, the nature of the adversarial process causes it to drag out more. But when you have the prosecutor's office doing its own little in-house, you know, cleanup, it goes a lot quicker.
And it, you know, morally, it's healthy to be doing this. It's morally, it's appropriate to cleanse, you know, these processes. We all make mistakes in life. That just happens, and when you've acknowledged them and move on, in this case it affects other people, just not everyday stuff. That's a really healthy thing, and it's a learning process for others as well. Yeah. Gee whiz, we got this wrong, maybe we should learn from that next time.
Right.
But if you're constantly trying to defend the indefensible, you're just perpetuating the wrong, and that's not good for anyone.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
So
question 3. Do you believe that prosecutors and defence lawyers who knowingly mislead the court and or the jury should be subject to prosecution?
They should certainly not be immune. Go ahead, sorry.
Yes. So there are two choices here. Yes, I don't think they should be any less immune to prosecution than any other citizen, 98%.
Yeah.
And no, they should have immunity from prosecution, 2%. This issue of immunity, there are, particularly where there is known wrongdoing, that's distinct from just being a bit slack. Where there is known wrongdoing, to me, there should be no immunity. And the fact that there isn't, if there wasn't immunity, then people will behave differently before they take the actions they take.
Yeah.
Because they're using that immunity as some sort of shield against good behaviour. And I think the cases of Stephen and Brendan are classic examples of that.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, so question 4, do you believe a prosecutor or defence lawyer should be allowed to make statements to a jury in opening and closing that they know or should know are untrue without a judge ruling them to be inadmissible? Okay, so it seems to me, I'll give you the answers in a sec, but it seems to me that, prosecutors and defence lawyers can pretty much say what they like in opening and closing without any risk of being objected to by the other side, let alone the judge. So the answer to that question is, should they be able to say anything when they know what they're saying is untrue? Yes, they should be able to say anything in opening and closing arguments and let the jury decide. That was 6%.
Right.
No, such statements, that is factual inaccuracy, should be inadmissible, and the judge should be alert to quashing them.
Should not even be put before the jury. Absolutely.
Yes. Or if they say something,
just like King Kratz, when the voicemails come up and he's sitting there telling Judge, how does that help the jury decide who killed Teresa Halbach? That's all I'm asking. How does that help the judge? How does that help the jury, Judge? So yeah, you see how sticklers they were for what should go before the jury. Well, I would say that not everything needs to go before the jury. So I would agree with.
Well, yeah, because there's a different. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but there's a different set of rules that apply to opening statements and closing statements that doesn't apply in the giving of evidence normally, which the other sides can object to. As far as I'm aware, if someone knows otherwise, please feel free to shoot me down. But in Brendan's case, which is something I mentioned today in a post, Mr. Fallon got up in closing from Brendan's case and made this statement. That statement is, innocent people don't confess. Right? That's just a straight out lie. He knows full well that they do. But he's purporting that to be fact and influencing the jury over a piece of information he knows is not true.
I agree.
To me, the judge should be quashing that statement and admonishing him in the front of the jury, saying you should not rely on that statement as it's factually untrue.
Yeah.
But they say stuff like it just doesn't matter. Just blow it out there and with all the emotion of a closing statement or an opening statement without any fear of anyone contradicting them.
I have a couple of videos about it. There was a little PowerPoint that accompanied Kratz's opening statement. He had this little PowerPoint that he had going up on the Elmo, they called it. And at one point, dude, he had some little arrows pointing at some areas on the outside of the RAV4 tailgate where they had found blood. And he had some little arrows pointing at the blood saying it was Stephen Avery's blood.
Yeah, I know.
That's in his opening argument. He had that up on a big old screen for the jury to see, these two big old arrows pointing and saying that it wasn't Stephen Avery. It wasn't proven to be Stephen Avery's blood. It was inconclusive as to whose blood that was, really. And Sherry Cohane ended up, testifying to all that. But, yeah, that's exactly, Kratz could misrepresent anything. It didn't seem like it mattered if he did it.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, most people would support that view that they should not be allowed to effectively make statements that are untrue.
To confuse the jury, in my opinion, yeah.
Correct. So question 5, do you believe the American criminal justice system is biased towards obtaining convictions over obtaining the truth? Okay, so answer no, I don't see any substantial evidence of that, 4%. Yes, it is clear that in practice the truth is not the primary goal, 96%.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Question 6, do you believe that interviews of persons under the age of 18 must be done so by law enforcement with a legal representative or advocate present, and if not, evidence obtained from those interviews be inadmissible against them? Answers, no, we simply need the truth. It doesn't matter if there are representatives present, 3%. Yes, persons under 18 are not capable of representing their own best interests and should have a suitably qualified representative present at all times, 97%.
Certainly with what the statistics coming out about wrongful convictions and false confessions, yeah, I think anybody under 18, that there should be some serious precautions going on, because we are seeing the proof that these false confessions, especially with minors and those who are still at a very suggestible age, are producing a lot of false confessions, and to deny that it's happening is foolishness. So.
Yes, and then if we go back to the example you used before, and that was with Brendan, in his case, none of those so-called confessions or admissions would be admissible if this was the rule, because in no situation was there a legal representative present in any of those interviews. None.
I don't know what
Zero.
happened. I don't know what happened at Fox Hills, to be perfectly honest.
Well, he certainly didn't have a lawyer present.
No.
And when he did have a lawyer representing him, i.e. Kaczynski, he didn't bother to turn up. So
basically,
you take away exactly. I mean, how do we let it get this far is beyond me. And you know, if I could just be a little kinder to law enforcement for a moment, it's in their interest that they have a proper representative for a juvenile, because you know, we're going to find that most law enforcement people, not all, but most, want to do the right thing, right? They do. Yeah. It's in their interest to have that protection themselves. So, right. So to my way of thinking, I think that would be a great piece of law reform to make sure that, I think you suggested, it doesn't even have to be a lawyer, but you know, an appointed independent advocate who knows the rules of evidence and what's in the person's interest or not, which could be any number of approved people who have appropriate training.
Yeah, it could be lawyers that just didn't like the whole idea of arguing in court, who just care about kids and juveniles and stuff, and so they end up helping out that way because they're not really good at arguing in court. Could be, I mean, and I know there's a lot of lawyers that end up that way. They know the law, they're phenomenal when it comes to the law, but put them in a courtroom where they got to argue and they freeze up and can't talk, you know. So
yes. And they would also, by virtue of putting their hand up for this activity, be bound by a code of conduct that they have to do certain things to properly represent the person in those interviews. Mm-hmm. And it follows from that question to question 7. It's sort of in a similar vein. Do you believe a person under the age of 18 should be allowed to waive their Miranda rights, that is, you know, the right to remain silent, and etc.?
That's an interesting question.
Yes. Yes, they should be allowed to waive their Miranda rights if they want to, just like those 18 years and over, 14%. No, they should not be allowed to waive their Miranda rights, as there is a danger they may not understand the implications of such an action.
I don't believe,
86%.
Although I will say that around 16, 17, 18 is when some, you know, a lot of youngsters are starting to have run-ins with the law and are starting to get into a little bit of trouble. And I don't know, they start to have more and more contact, and it's once you've had more and more contact with law enforcement that really makes it that really allows you to understand what your Miranda rights are and what they mean. You know, your first time you know, when it's your first time, like it was for Brendan, he has no frame of reference to gauge what was happening to him. You know, he just, this is the first time he ever saw cops. He just thought this is what happens when, this is just cops being cops, right? Because
exactly.
he had nothing else to compare it to, right? So he just figured it was normal for cops being cops, that this is just what happens down here all the time.
Correct.
You know, he doesn't realize that no, there's not terrible grisly murders every single day that they're, you know, doing this.
Oh yeah, Brendan didn't even realize he was confessing to a criminal activity.
Yeah.
I mean,
still asked if he was going back to school. When it was all said and done, still thought he was going back to school.
So in my view, at least, and obviously in the view of the majority, if under 18-year-olds are not allowed to waive their Miranda rights,
I believe
what's the risk to the state? The risk to the state is have to wait a bit to get a person present, right, to be with them. So what's the risk to the individual? The risk to the individual is far greater by waiving rights, as it was for Brendan. As it was for Brendan. The risk to the state is zero or minimal. Right. So if the weight of the evidence against the accused is so great, Miranda rights aren't going to actually going to sway that weight of evidence.
Yeah, I believe those people that young are at least still so close to the borderline of actually being able to understand what their Miranda rights are. That I think it's a good rule of thumb.
Okay, so question 8. There's 12 altogether, by the way, just to keep the perspective. Question 8, do you believe prosecutors and defence attorneys should be allowed to make statements to the media prior to trial other than to simply recite the charges being laid? We know why this question is out there.
Yeah.
And 97% said no, other than reciting the charges being laid. Any other commentary is potentially prejudicial to the presumption of innocence and has the potential to pollute the jury pool. And 3% said, yes, I think it's okay for statements of any type to be made to the media, as it's in the public's interest to know as much about the case as possible. Right. So, you know, you take away the statements by Ken Kratz on March the 2nd, I think it was.
Well, the whole sweaty sweat down the hall, sweat, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. You know, this whole, I mean, the whole image he paints there for everybody that was watching and listening. I mean, it's...
Yep.
I mean, that imagery it sticks with people. I mean,
exactly.
What he did was purposeful, and it just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
He made statements in particular about Stephen Avery, about charges against Stephen Avery that were ultimately never, there were 6 charges against Stephen Avery. 2 of them never found their way into court at the start, and 1 was dismissed halfway through, particularly the charges of false imprisonment and rape, right? So, which is bizarre that Brendan can get charged with rape, but Stephen not. Think about
I love it.
It's just like the weirdness of that, right?
Oh yeah, Brendan's confession is true and voluntary, and we know this because he said that he stabbed her. He said that he raped her. He said those are all things you can't corroborate. You can't sit here and look at all the things that we see in this confession and then try to tell me it's all true because of some things that Brendan said that can't be corroborated. Are you kidding me? I mean, no brainer here, folks. That's ridiculously stupid.
So anyway, the basic message here is okay. You should be able to recite the charges. I mean, what the media in turn does is their business, but in terms of the prosecution,
sure.
Yeah, fine. That's fine. So question 9. The Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTUS, has directed that juveniles and persons with intellectual deficits are required to be given special care when in the hands of law enforcement to ensure their statements and admissions are voluntary and reliable. Do you believe special care should be in the form of A, the investigator exercising their professional judgment as to whether special care is warranted and what form it should take, 7%, or B, a standard SCOTUS-approved prescriptive written checklist be completed by law enforcement certifying the steps taken to fulfill the special care assessment, 93%.
Right.
This is basically a question that's saying, let's get prescriptive about this. Let's not make it so arbitrary.
Let's not make it so vague. Right.
Yes. So, and I guess those answers speak themselves.
Because I sure as heck don't like the way that Wisconsin has been able to argue all throughout Brendan's, all the arguments here, that they've been able to just stay vague and lean on EDPA and just say that courts don't have to write a whole lot about how much special care was given. Well, they should need to do that. They should be able They should be able to point to some things of how they considered it and why they eventually came to the decision they came about whether or not special care was, so that it can be seen that special care was a part of the consideration. It should be there.
Correct. And if they got it wrong, there's a framework against which to measure that they got it wrong. Okay, so if we have a prescriptive process and the prosecutors or the investigators said we did this, and this, but it's later shown that those things were not adequate, well, you've got something to measure it against.
Right.
So you can measure the inadequacy against what they did do, rather than this uncertain, vague, unwritten, I think this is what we did. So, okay, so question 10. It has been suggested by some well-known law reform advocates that the system of elected law enforcement officials, examples judges, prosecutors and sheriffs, is flawed and should be changed to one where they are appointed by a bipartisan peer group for an initial 12 months and then subject to public election after that. Do you think this suggestion is worth adopting? There are three options here.
I mean, it sounds like we'd probably get some more, probably fair-minded people and more of the people we maybe really want in these places. But that's a lot of stuff that has to get done in order to make that happen, and that's where I think it might run off the rails, possibly. But I think it sounds great.
Well, yeah, you got to start with a good idea to get one, right? Yeah. So the scary bit is that if there's no discussion or people say, it's all too hard.
Right.
So the three answers were, no, I'm happy with the current system where these officials are simply elected by the people from day one, 3%. Yes, I think the proposal has merit as it might ensure the best people are appointed and then based on their performance and not just their election promises, have to get the approval of the people they are supposed to serve 1 year later, 74%.
Right.
And item 3 was, I neither like the current system or this proposed one, 23%. Well, one thing's for sure, if you go to the heart of this, only 3% like the current system. So forget the alternatives. Right. Do you like the current system? Clearly there is a need for something to change here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, question 11. Based on your current knowledge of the US criminal justice system, do you think it is serving the citizens of the United States well? This is a simple yes, no. Yes, it's not perfect, but I think it works for the most part very well, 7%. No, whilst it's okay, I feel it needs improving to meet the current expectations and needs of citizens, 93%.
Right. Yeah, it needs citizens getting involved and being active players in their criminal justice system. That's really the answer at this point, because as long as the people in power feel like the people that are out there that they need to worry about, like the citizens at large, if they feel like those people are placated and not an issue for them, they'll do whatever they want. But when people are up there, when people are there and in their face and up their rear end every day, then they start thinking about those people and making decisions that are going to hopefully get those people off of them. And so, so it ends up getting them to do the right thing. So that's why people need to get involved. And I know how people feel. I truly, truly do. With our lives and everything that we have going on, work and, so many people have kids and and all that stuff that in soccer practices and they got to get to in addition to trying to support and all that stuff. I get it. There's a lot going on in life, and we're all busy, and we got these schedules that are hectic and all that. But we all do have to, at some point. This is what I've learned in the last couple of years. We all at some point have to stop and take an interest in what's going on around us, because trust me, you don't want to find out how screwed the criminal justice system is when you find yourself on the wrong end of it. Okay, that's not when you want to find out. Okay,
correct.
That's absolutely, that is not when you want to find out. You want to be an active player. You want to understand what's going on in the justice system at any given time, or at least be somewhat educated and taking an interest, because that's what this world needs right now. It needs people taking, and not just in like criminal justice, but in all kinds of things. You know, the planet itself is having problems with the polar ice caps melting and stuff. We all need a general awareness and a general, to take an interest in what these things are, what's happening. You know, we may not all agree on the solutions, but we all need to take an interest in what's happening so that we're all at least aware of it. And it goes across the board with many different topics.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, as you know, in recent years, or I think you know, I've spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, some of which has been volunteering over there in teaching. And most of Eastern Europe is new to democracy since 1989, and that doesn't happen overnight. It's an evolving thing. And I'd often get asked by people when I've been there, you know, what do you think democracy is? And when you get asked that question, it's interesting because you don't really think of it in those terms generally when you're already in a democracy. And I say to them, democracy is about responsibility. A democracy only truly works when the citizens take responsibility, whether that's to turn up at the ballot box and vote, to have a voice about issues like we're talking about.
And hold the leaders accountable.
Yeah. Democracy is just not a nice slogan on the side of a building. It's how you behave. And
freedom isn't free.
Correct. And sometimes we can get a little complacent about how we value democracy by not participating. So we do need to participate in significant ways to make sure that the health of our democratic ideals are maintained. And, you know, one of the things that I've noticed over the decades I've been involved in business and in the US for that matter is that Americans have always been great innovators for solutions of all sorts of things. This is the hallmark of American society, how they're willing to go at things and make things better. Now, this should equally apply to law reform and to issues of social justice. It's not good enough to send a man to the moon, but at the same time send an innocent person to the electric chair, right? That innovative skill of Americans and that ability to solve problems should be applied to the criminal justice system just as much as to any other endeavor of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's my soapbox for you. Okay, so the final question, question 12. Do you believe that there should be a statutory payment for each year of wrongful conviction and that it should be paid within 6 months of release? Okay, so there were 3 responses here. No, I believe each case should be judged on its merits by the politicians of the time with no specific time frame for payment, 4%. Yes, the payment should be determined and paid by virtue of statute law and not subject to the discretion of politicians, 95%. And no, I'm not in favour of any compensation for wrongful convictions, 1%. So the purpose of that survey there is to highlight, perhaps if you like, the issues of law reform in part or in whole that would go a long way to prevent the sorts of issues that have arisen with both Stephen and Brendan, let alone all the other people that we're learning about along this journey. And that's why I say if we can address, if the nation can address the issues of reform, it'll be a much healthier and more equitable and fair country for everyone.
Certainly.
No matter what your station in life is, financial or otherwise, right?
And if everybody was taking an interest, it would not be such a chore as people, which is probably something people use to talk themselves out of taking an interest or getting involved, is that they feel like it would be such a chore to make a change. Well, if everybody was taking an interest and everybody was interested in keeping the system honest, it wouldn't be such a chore. It would be
exactly
a lot easier.
It'll be a vital process. It'll be well, look at this renewal process that's going on. This is part of living, and taking an interest and taking your share of the responsibility to make things better is your legacy, your human legacy for those that follow you.
Right.
In 100 years from now, pretty much everyone, 8 billion people on the planet will be dead, right?
Right.
There's going to be another 8 or 10 billion more people follow us. What are we doing today to make sure we leave behind a better planet, both in terms of its physical and social state, so that others follow and enjoy it just like we have? So it doesn't happen by chance. That's the point.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So
anyway, they're my surveys. So hopefully people found them interesting, and they're a bit of a benchmark to judge your own opinions against.
Now explain to people how the surveys are going to, or well, at least one more survey is going to come into play here real soon.
Yes. Okay. So, as you know, there's been this very serious issue being debated out there about this. I don't know what to call this person, but his name's Captain Crunch.
Yes.
And there's been a serious sort of debate about whether Captain Crunch is British or American. And
maybe
it's been
not
a fairly
serious, but
it's
fun anyway.
Tongue-in-cheek serious. And so there will shortly be released a opportunity for talking about participation, an opportunity for people to have a say. And there will be a debate put out there where we have a protagonist for the argument that Captain Crunch is British. We'll put his views. And then opposing that will be another person putting the views that Captain Crunch is American in a judicial format. So it'll be as we see in
oral arguments.
Yep. And following that, the jury will be given the opportunity to decide who is one or the other. And that will be done by way of a one-question survey. And that one-question survey will be sent out to those who care to participate, and they can vote simply by clicking that Captain Crunch is either British or American. And that will be the official result. Interestingly, the loser of that particular case, the protagonist that loses, has to then sing on video the national anthem of the opposing country. So the American who's actually protagonizing have to sing the "God Save the Queen," or that might be "God Save Our Ears," and the other one will have to sing the "Star Spangled Banner," which is quite the vocal challenge for anyone.
Well, this used to be just for fun.
So I would encourage, as a one last survey, a single question survey, that people might like to have a bit of fun and participate in that.
Yep. So okay, that'll be fun to do there. So that's actually coming pretty soon. Actually, that's probably coming within the next couple of days.
Correct. It will indeed.
I will leave the link to Mark's survey and the information below that video for anybody that is curious where that will be. So you'll be able to watch the video and then give your opinion or tick your jury vote on the way out. So
that's right. Yes. and unlike some other juries' votes that we've thought about in recent times, this one will not be influenced by anyone who shouldn't be influencing it.
Right. Because nobody else will care other than me and anyway. All right. Well, it's been fun, Mark. It's been a pleasure talking to you as usual. Can't wait to see you in Manitowoc for the rally.
Yes.
Your T-shirt.
Yes, I'll be there I'll be there with bells on and looking forward to meeting you in person and all the other wonderful proponents and supporters of Brendan and Stephen.
Yep. There's going to be quite a few of them.
Yep.
People coming from Chicago. So I'm actually going to be in Chicago for a little bit, waiting for my second plane.
All right. Okay. Yeah. It should be fun. We'll all get in there together and share the love, as they say.
Yep. We're gonna have some fun.
Yep.
Alrighty, buddy.
All right then. Thanks again.
Yeah. Yep. All right, that wraps it up, folks. Hope you had fun. Hope you thought it was at least somewhat interesting. Like I said, can't wait to see everybody there in Manitowoc at the rally coming up here in a couple weeks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. We'll see ya.